We're honored to be joined now by North Miami Police Major, Mr. Tim Belcher. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Major Belcher, you've been an officer 27 years now. Can
Yes.
you give us some insight on your perspective on police and youth relations in Miami-Dade County?
Well, since I've been here, we had the opportunity to start a PAL program, a Police Athletic League in North Miami, because I saw the kids coming out of school not having anything to do, but get into trouble or to get into fights. So we decided to start this PAL program back in 1996. By starting that PAL program, when those kids came out of school, they was able to come right onto the basketball court.
Wow.
And not only them playing basketball, but it brought other students to come watch. So that cleared up the streets, cleared up the fights, cleared up the kids getting in trouble. So that was a big impact for our city. Next, after that, the PAL program started growing as we have had new leaders to come in to take over. So as far as the police and youth, it was great because we had police officers there. We had the youth there. Everybody was shaking hands. Everybody was smiling, happy after they came from school. Then some of those kids also get the opportunity to not only speak to the officers, but to come out there and have fun with the officers. So then at the same time, the 5,000 role models roll in, which was the 500 back then.
Wow.
So a lot of those kids now that we have in the basketball program, in the PAL program, we lured them over to the 5,500 role models at the time, which was headed under Congresswoman Frederica Wilson.
Absolutely. I know you've been involved. You've been a 5,000 role model mentor for many years. Can you talk about your involvement with the program?
I came in the program in 1996. I had a friend of mine, a friend of my uncle's rather, and he told me, said, Belcher, you need to get involved with this program. And I said, well, introduce me to the people because I would like to be a part of that program. We had a mentor program within North Miami that I was part of. So throughout my career, I've been mentoring kids. And you know, as we grow up, we say, oh, I don't think I'm gonna ever do that. But I did get the opportunity. 5,000 role models rolled around and I got involved with the 5,000 role models and it was very overwhelming. I really enjoyed my time here with the 5,000 role models, being able to see the kids smile, go in certain places that they would never get to go if they were never part of that program. They get opportunity to go to colleges, they get scholarships. We take them on trips. They go to DC. These kids get to ride airplanes. Kids that live in the urban communities who would never get the opportunity to see these type of things, they get to do these things and travel and go to nice places and see things that they can enjoy when, as they move along in life.
Absolutely. And one of the signature collaborations that we have with the 5,000 role models with law enforcement here in South Florida is the Police and Youth Conference. Can you talk about some things that occurred during that time?
Well, first of all, you're going to have hundreds of officers from many different departments that's going to be there. And we're going to have them sit next to each one of the boys that sit in that audience. And those boys are going to be from different schools throughout Miami-Dade County and Broward County. So we want to make sure the officers build that relationship by sitting next to those kids, get to know those kids, shake their hands. I want to see a smile on each one of those kids' face and the officer's face when we announce them and say, ladies and gentlemen, we now have the police and youth from Miami-Dade County and Broward County in this room along with Florida Highway Patrol. But we want to make sure we educate the kids and our officers at the same time because the information that we want to disseminate to the kids, we want also this information be disseminated to the officers too, to spread the word not only to the colleagues of the officers, but the colleagues of the kids. So we can all spread this word to those who are not attending the summit. So we want to make sure that we do relationships, how the kids need to approach officers, how officers will be approaching kids, being distracted while driving, things like that. Just having that relationship when the officer approach you, how should you respond? Not being brutal with your language, but being respectful. Respectful, start the conversation off real good and nice, and it ends well at the end of the day. So we want to make sure that those individuals get the opportunity to hear that information, see that information, and experience that information when we put them up on the stage and we do a little role playing at the end of the presentation.
Major Belcher, you've been an officer for 27 years. What would you say to a young person who may be watching today who may want to pursue a career in law enforcement?
Well, what I would tell them is make sure you stay in school, get your education, which is very important. And that's what we push here in the 5,000 role models. Education is the key. You get a mentor, you get educated from all the law enforcement officers and other professions that we have within the 5,000 role models. So we don't just have law enforcement, but we have professions, judges, firefighters. We have all different type of professions giving these young men the opportunity to see that they have a path in front of them that they can follow, whether they go to college or they get a professional career and they continue to move on in their life and be successful. So I just want to make sure that the young man understand to learn how to respect themselves so they can respect those outside of them, get their education, and continue to move forward. And once you move forward, don't look back, but let what's back behind you keep pushing you forward to be successful in life. So the main thing is go to college and then keep a good background about yourself. And when you apply for these professional positions, as far as police officer, you need to have a clean background. You need to have a good driver's record. You need to have good credit as far as your finances. So those things are very important. And you also need to make sure that you pick and choose the right company, because you don't want to hang around the wrong company and it gets you in trouble. So that's very important that you pick and choose and make the right decisions. Sexting, dealing with young ladies in the wrong way. You have to learn how to be respectful when you deal with those things. Your peers, your school teachers in school, you have to be respectful. You never know when you might need them to write your letter of recommendation to get you in college, to get you a job, or whatever the case may be. All this stuff come full circle. When the time comes for you, now you want to get serious with your life and you want to do the right thing. So you need to make sure you cover all those things as far as moving ahead in life, being in a profession such as law enforcement, being in a profession as far as being an attorney or a firefighter. You need a good background to do those things. And I would always tell young men, don't wait till you get 25 years old to where you have built a bad reputation about yourself, and now you decide to say, I want to be a police officer. Because the thing is that when we go back in your background and you have so many inconsistencies or so many bad marks in your background, that is what's going to hold you back. So in order for you to move forward, make sure you do the right thing, be respectful, go to school, and follow the right crowd and be around the right people.
Great advice and guidance from 5,000 role model mentor, Major Tim Belcher. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
We're honored to be joined now by the Chief of Police, Coral Gables, Florida, Mr. Ed Hudak.
How you doing, sir?
Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure to be here.
Chief, Coral Gables is such a unique place. How would you characterize policing?
Well, and again, I think in our department and in our city, I mean, we are in the smack middle of Miami-Dade County. Now, in all crimes, you know, a lot of our criminal element doesn't necessarily live in the communities that we police. So it comes from the outside. What we have to do, and our strategies are a little bit different than my colleagues in a lot of other cities and in the county, is that we have to be able to assess the good and the bad and respond in a defensive posture, but yet also proactively in those areas. So it's a challenge, again, because we're still dealing with our crimes that come through, but we have like 700,000 cars pass through Coral Gables Monday through Friday. That's a lot of people.
You speak about being proactive. As we talk about prevention and the prevention of youth gun violence, youth violence in general, what strategies have you seen that have been successful over your 30-year career?
Well, I think the collaboration of all the police and the Dade County chiefs of police, the Miami-Dade County, the city of Miami, the one thing I think has been effective throughout my 34 years in law enforcement is the fact that it's a very collaborative effort. And although we may not have a lot of gun violence in Coral Gables, we may be able to assist our brother and sister cities with their gun violence and those subjects that have been involved in crimes in other jurisdictions. So, we're not immune to it. I mean, the way this all came about was because of a situation where a Coral Gables police officer used their firearm and killed a black youth with a toy gun. That is kind of the birthplace. So the pride that the Coral Gables Police Department has is that incident involving one of our officers and a young black youth started what is today the 5,000 role models. It started between then Chief Butler, Frederica Wilson, who started it. We had to come together. The two very brilliant people that said we need to come to a collaborative effort, both communities, to talk about what makes us different, but what yet makes us the same. It started at the Biltmore Hotel.
Wow.
Was the first meeting, and it's ballooned to what we see today in the conferences throughout with thousands of kids and hundreds of police officers, and we have evolved into what is probably one of the most premier organizations for community relations within a certain population group anywhere in the country.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the Police and Youth Conference really began as a product of that shooting.
Correct.
What role would you say that perception of boys of color and explicit or implicit bias plays in your how you all
Well, I
police
think
now?
the biases go in both directions. Okay, I think if you look at a police officer, regardless of what color their uniform is, there is an implied bias by society, not just boys of color, about what that's going to be. The same thing I think every one of us, depending on what our upbringing is, as different as you and I are. Right. The diversity and me understanding your culture takes an effort on my part. Just like you to understand the culture of being a white male in a police uniform takes some understanding. And what the 5,000 role models has done, like today when they're sitting side by side, right. It's the first time that some of those boys and some of those officers will ever sit next to each other and have a conversation about themselves. We both have roles, whether that juvenile, regardless of their color, but we'll use boys of color right now are going along their lives and for some reason come across that police officer. That police officer's already at a heightened sense of alertness only because they don't know. Right. By what we wear, and I tell my mentees, both at the University of Miami and part of the role model attendees, I don't know who you are. Yeah. As soon as you see those lights come on, as soon as you see this uniform, you know it's authority, but you don't know me as a person. So that's where I think we have come so far in bridging that gap. And that started after that. It was to have a conversation as to why that officer in Coral Gables many years ago and that child of color with a toy gun ended so tragically for both. And that conversation has continued to what it is today, the 5,000 role models. I mean, I think it's just beautiful.
And we certainly appreciate your willingness and the willingness of your department to face some of these challenges head on. Now, I know that you've worked with the University of Miami athletes for about 30 years now. What are some lessons that you've been able to glean from that may be transferred to the young men in the audience today?
And again, I've worked with the University of Miami football team specifically for years. And it brings in, predominantly boys of color, right, into one of the highest profile teams in South Florida history. Absolutely. Only because it's the University of Miami. With that comes the bright lights. Yeah. It's similar to what a police officer takes on when they take that oath. We are expected to have the answers, so we are held to a higher standard. Those players, because of their athletic ability and have behaved for the most part off the field through high school, now have an opportunity to go to college, to possibly get a professional career. All of those can be sidetracked by off-field conduct, right? So I found very interestingly enough is that a lot of these talented athletes from across the country had never had a conversation with a police officer until they met me, and a lot of them said, my first thing was, hey, I hear 5-0, I'm taking off. And that's not just in South Florida, that's everywhere. That's a shame that it's gotten to that because I think there has to be that trust. If we're going to attack gun violence, it is going to be because of the partnerships of the people in the communities that are going to help us. We can buy spot shotters, we can flood the area with police. It's only going to work when those that are motivated to do it, these young men of color, decide to take back their streets. And we will help them no matter what. And we'll do it correctly. But that's what I started to see, is that as these 18-year-old men came to the University of Miami, and some of them left as millionaires right out of school, and they had to learn a lot about life and business in 4 short years while everybody was telling them they're great. and the expectations are higher. So the hard work that we start doing now, and this is how the 5,000 role models gets in, we start teaching them and they start seeing that good conduct transcends everything else to making that person successful in whatever they do, business, entrepreneurship. And you know, we do that because of our jobs, we being the police. So if we can actually give pointers to somebody now about how to either get into this job or be successful, how can we not do that? I mean, you know, we are, you know, law enforcement is of a community. We are for the community. We are the deciders. We have the ultimate authority to take somebody's constitutional rights away. That's a very powerful thing. Mm-hmm. As much as we want to be respected, we have to respect those. And when that mutual respect doesn't come together, we see some of the unfortunate things that happen. You know, at the end of the day, at that scene, that person who took that oath is responsible. And if there is mutual respect on both sides, and I'm talking about either side of a door, of a car door, mm-hmm. and we have rules within police that people have to act a certain way that wear these badges. And other people don't have that ability. The successful interactions every day that happen in this community is because there's a mutual respect. And that gives that person in the car a leg up. That makes that person outside the car with the authority that much better because they've been able to diffuse it. They've been able to talk about it. We see it every day. And that is the learning curve that I think our entire community has to have, is there has to be a sense of mutual respect when we're doing these things. What the 5,000 role models started back in Coral Gables was to have the conversation, to have the respect. And you know, what we've done at the university is what goes through an officer's mind. You know, is that person have a gun? I tell the officers, or I tell the football players all the time, the first thing you do when you get stopped, and Chris Rock has a great piece. Turn off the radio, roll down the windows, turn on the lights, and put your hands up like this. Not because you're guilty, but because that officer, we train. We know hands kill. The moment you say, officer, I know hands kill. Why? I'm a 5,000 role model mentee. And you know what? You may still get a ticket, but now that officer immediately knows that you're not going to, that you're telling him, I'm not there to hurt you. And I've been teaching that to the football players for years. I mean, that's a better way to have that interaction because it brings everything down. Not by the officer's part, by others. And if the officer mishandles it after that, well, that's why we have, you know, rules and regulations within police departments, because we don't allow that in any department. So I think the collaborative effort from the university has transcended and started from the 5,000 role models, and it continues to be what is going to make Miami-Dade County great.
Absolutely. Collaboration, respect, communication. Thank you so much for your commitment,
Appreciate
Chief
you.
Hootlight.
Very
Thank
much
you for
so.
joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
We're glad to be joined now by the Director of the Miami-Dade Police Department, Juan Perez. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Miami-Dade County is such a big and broad and diverse county. What are some of the challenges that you foresee in policing youth relations?
You mentioned them, big, broad, and diverse, right? So we're a very large county, and we have people from many different backgrounds, and meeting all the expectations and really having an impact on so many people is difficult for us to do. But I think now, over the last, generation of law enforcement, right, over the last decade, we've made incredible strides in building relationships with our youth, increasing the amount of programs, and not only the Miami-Dade Police Department, but through the Miami-Dade Association of Chiefs of Police. We're all on board. We're all on board. We know that the future of our community is truly impacted by giving opportunity to the kids, mentoring, And I know Tim Belcher was speaking earlier, and I overheard him say something, and it reminded me of a story that they tell me about when you drive a car. The windshield is very large, and the rear view mirror is very small. If you drive and you concentrate on that small mirror, you're going to crash. So the opportunity ahead of us is very large. We just got to focus in on the right thing, which is that front windshield of the car. We need to take this community into the right direction, and it takes all of us to really steer the community in the right direction. And I think us as law enforcement, we're learning now. We're still learning, but we're going in the right direction.
Miami-Dade County is consistently in the top 5 in terms of economic inequality. What role does race and class play in how communities are policed?
Oh, it's incredible. It's all tied in together, right? Because we know that crime at times is associated with socioeconomic status. So, right now, with organizations such as yours that are giving opportunity to kids, the employment efforts by the county and by the local officials that are pumping in funding into communities that have the greatest level of violence, all that is helping to reduce the crime. Because if we don't have opportunity, if we don't give hope to people, they will resort to crime. They won't, sometimes it's not even economic in nature, but they lose hope because the perception is different, the perspective's gone, so they're not gonna have any fear in utilizing violence, picking up a gun, shooting somebody. But when we give people opportunity, that reduces opportunities for us to have an encounter, to deal with crime issues, as opposed to us having an encounter, playing basketball, passing out food, mentoring kids. That's what we really want to spend our time and effort on. And the more all the pieces of the puzzle come together and there's greater collaboration in all aspects of government and society, the better opportunity we have for the community. And that lessens the amount of interactions that we have that are police in nature with our community.
Absolutely. What would you say to a young person who may be listening today who is already in a violence-plagued community, heightening the sense that they would come into a negative interaction with law enforcement, so they may be afraid of the cops and the robbers? Right. What would you say to that young man?
Don't be afraid of us. In fact, we're on your side. We want to help you out. And we have programs ourselves. There's many programs, 5,000 Role Model, and there's many other programs that are out there for them to get assistance, to get the help, to get them away. When I mean assistance, it's to get them away from the bad influences. Go to their teachers, their counselors, their principals at school. Tell them they want opportunity, because the opportunities are there. They just got to seek it. And they have to stand up against those that are creating the havoc in the community, walk away from them, and seek the guidance and the mentorship that's required for us as adults to give the kids so they can pull them out of trouble.
What would you say is the significance of events like the Police and Youth Conference?
Oh, that's a great event for us, because at times that may be the real first encounter that a child has, and I say a child because I'm an old man, but a kid has, to interact with police and to get us when our guard is down. And we get the kids when their guards are down, and we get to interact and they get to know us. Ultimately, they got to remember, the kids have to remember this, the youth has to remember this. We were all youth. I was 15, 16, 17 as well. I was in high school. I grew up right here in this community. I'm a product of Miami Southridge Senior High School. So we've all been there. We're all the same, except for a little older. And if somebody looks at me and thinks that, I'm the director, how did I get there? This is truly an indication anybody can make it. It truly is an indication anybody can make it if you work hard enough, if you believe in yourself, and you don't lose hope.
What is some insight do you think that officers can gain from connecting and having conversations with the young men?
Well, it's important for us at times to listen so that we can learn from those young men, and then we can lead them. Because if we don't know them and we don't hear their voices and hear their concerns, we can never change those perceptions. Oftentimes, I get judged by, it could be an officer, one of my own officers, or an officer that's from another part of the country, may have done something that was erroneous, a mistake, lacking judgment, whatever it is. I get judged by those acts, like all of us do. An action of one individual can harm all of us. And in order for me to change perceptions, that's not us overall. Just because someone else made a mistake doesn't mean that I have a certain way of believing, a certain way of acting, or I'm some type of person that is perceived to be. Once you talk to us and you see who we are, I think we are confident that we can change perceptions, but we have to be able to listen to be able to change those perceptions.
Absolutely. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face, and how can the community help you?
Well, the biggest challenge is, as a department, is dealing with the gun violence, right? And a lot of that could be that there's a lack of trust in law enforcement, so people are afraid to pick up the phone and call us. And certainly we don't want that, so that lack of trust. So by us, participating more in community events, by us partnering up with organizations that deal with the youth, I think we can go a long way in building up the community to where it should be, so we don't have to deal with that gun violence. As a profession, even though there's a negative perception by some in our community, overwhelmingly, a lot of our youth still want to go into the law enforcement community. And that gives me a sense of pride, because that tells us that we're doing something right. But what we want to do is continue to expand that perception, so that it's not only some of the youth want to be police officers. We'd like to see one day that all the youth can be police. And what I mean by police is looking at the agencies and realizing that it's not only about the police officers that's out in the street. We have psychologists in our police department. We have dispatchers. We have lawyers in our police department. We have a little bit of every single profession. And there's opportunities for you to help the community and serve the community and be part of public safety without actually having to wear the uniform. And the other roles are just as important, and sometimes even more important, because of the support role that keeps us going out in the street.
Director Perez, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for your service to our
Always a
community.
pleasure. Always a pleasure to participate with your organization. Thank you so much.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
We're grateful to be here in the Miami-Dade Police Department headquarters with former Director J.D. Patterson, current Assistant Chief of Miami Gardens, and the President of the 5,000 Role Models Foundation, Mr. J.D. Patterson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Marcus.
You've been involved with the 5,000 Role Models so many years. How would you characterize your involvement?
I would characterize my involvement as sort of like being engaged from the very beginning all the way up to this current existence. I would say about 27 or 28 years of participation. And when I think about the 5,000 Role Models, I think about how it started. It started with a group of 50 men and Congresswoman Wilson, who basically saw a need to have men engage with our youth. And then it went up to 500 role models, and now it's at 5,000 role models. I'm looking forward to the day it becomes 10,000 or 50,000, because I do think that men can have a major impact on the lives of our youth. And that's really what was the impetus of this. You heard from Chief Hudak about how an incident happened in Coral Gables. That incident led to this group coming into existence, and that problem, if you will, being dealt with or addressed. And it's not just that. It's not just about police and youth only. It's also about just young men becoming men. And that's kind of like what this 5,000 Role Models has become. It's not just about, again, interactions with the police, but it's also about reductions in violence, reduction in the dropout rate. It's about being responsible men. It's about, chasing your dreams. The scholarship fund, I think, has spent over $3, $4, $5 million on sending some of our youth to college. And those young men go off to college and they come back. And it's so wonderful to see them now contributing and taking positions of leadership throughout this community. So the 5,000 Role Models really not only closed the gap, but they built a bridge, I think, and a foundation for the youth, which I see some young men standing on now, and it just brings me great joy to see it.
Absolutely. As you talk about prevention, what are some ways what message would you have to young men and boys of color that will prevent them from falling prey to the mass incarceration epidemic?
I would say stand and be the man that you've been called to be. You haven't been called to take a walk into anybody's jail cell. You've been called to walk in your destiny, and your destiny is a great one. So therefore, learn your history, and not only learn your history, but appreciate your history. Understand that, Martin's dream or Malcolm's talk about by any means necessary means something even to you. Because if you do what's right and you consistently try to achieve your goal by any means necessary, as long as they're lawful and reasonable and respectful and they work in harmony with your fellow man, you can become most anything. Every now and then I think about, some of my predecessors who went before me, and I saw them fighting the fight, if you will, and overcoming obstacles. So we have overcome a lot, and we got to continue to overcome a lot. So I tell these young men to prevent in your mind, first of all, from falling into the traps that the world will set for you. Step up, stand out, march on. Know that you can be a part of a group like the 5,000 Role Models, and you see great men coming before you, whether they're lawyers or doctors or whether they're custodians or bus drivers. They're working hard to make a difference in their families' lives, and we want you to do the same thing. So from a prevention perspective, I think information is power. Mm-hmm. And when you give young men information and you also give them instruction and they take it and absorb it and they apply it to their lives, no matter what they face, they can always prevail. And I say that even with police, the police are here to keep order, to maintain peace. They're not here to create havoc. So therefore, if we keep that in mind, we interact with the police, what's my objective? Is my objective to get through this interaction without any sort of controversy? Or is my objective to challenge the authority of a policeman? Mm-hmm. And the policeman already has the authority, so if you challenge the authority of the policeman, you sort of like start with a losing end, a premise. So the bottom line is grow, go and become. So I think that's the message I would give to our youth. And don't ever stop until you get to where you want to go.
Absolutely. What is the significance of Miami-Dade College, the Miami Dolphins, Noble, all of these police departments, Miami-Dade County Public Schools, Broward County Public Schools, all coming together around a common theme of improving police and youth relations?
They understand the significance of the tension that exists between, authority and non-authority, between the youth and the police. They understand that it's something that's very important to our community and our nation. And they also understand that they can have some impact on making it a positive thing. So when the Dolphins or Miami-Dade Chiefs of Police or Miami-Dade College or even the educational system and the religious systems come together for a purpose, we can be a mighty, formidable force. So I think that's what we're saying when private industry, public industry, government, and religion come together for a purpose to try and save our youngsters. That's what this is all about. It's about saving our youngsters so our youngsters realize how important they are to us, and not only to us, but actually to themselves as well. And they get some real positive messages that are sort of like, again, put in them to where they sort of like, I think the word is inculcated. It just gets to be a part of who they are. And once it's a part of who they are, they can do great things and make a big difference in the next generation's life. So I think all our partners recognize that and want to do their best to help us achieve that goal through this organization.
Absolutely. What do you see for the future of policing?
What do
particularly when it comes to young people?
What I see is...
What are some challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, it's a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities, but I think our youngsters got to realize that we were all young. I think somebody already said that. And because we are all young, we know what it's like to be young, and we know the challenges that they face. And believe it or not, what I think really helps is hiring young people. Young people have to become a part of this law enforcement profession because they can relate to their peers. An older guy like me, I see a phone, I think it's sort of like a foreign language. But now policing is going to be definitely phone-centered or technology-centered. Even when you think about DNA years ago was fingerprints. So the reality is the world is evolving and our youth are evolving. Mm-hmm. But the best way for them to sort of like continue to press forward and to not create challenges for themselves is to become involved and engaged. So I think every police department in America is challenged to bring younger people into their ranks so that those younger people can take a position of authority and leadership and even sort of like information. Because again, I don't know how to use a phone like my daughter does. So I got to rely on her to show me how to do all these things. And when she shows me, it makes my life a whole lot easier. And the same thing with policing. Policing is changing because our society is changing. And to be informed and to be insightful and to be sort of like instructed is powerful. So our youngsters need those kind of things from the perspective of a senior person sharing with them and also from the perspective of them sharing with a senior person.
Based on your broad experience in different communities, how would you describe the difference, or is there a difference in how different communities are policed?
I would say there is a difference, but I don't think it should be a difference. I think you should be able to police the same way in whatever community you work. If you're a competent and capable and professional police officer, you're going to police the same, because the standard is the law. You can't go out there and police one community different from another just because you think it's different. If there's robberies happening in a certain area, you got to deal with those robberies that are happening in that certain area. If there's burglaries that's happening in another area, there's burglaries that you got to deal with there. But if there's nothing happening in that area, it's okay for you to just go through that area and just be visible without interacting with anybody in that level or in that area. So I do think crime has a lot to do with how we respond, and officers need to recognize that and not get caught up with the demographics, not get caught up with racial, measurements, or even gender measurements, or even lifestyle measurements. You patrol and you provide quality service to everybody you encounter. When I first came on the department, there was a sign at the station I used to work in, and it was defining the word courtesy, and it said treating every individual with the respect and dignity they deserve as a human being. And I've never forgotten that, because I think that's really what professional, productive, positive, and even sort of like appreciated policing is all about, being courteous to people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's going to be some people you got to have to handle, but you better be able to make the transition. But you don't make that transition unless it's necessary. If it's necessary, it's necessary. But if it's not necessary, there's no reason for even policemen to be afraid of everybody they encounter. Because the bottom line is we all encounter somebody at some point in life all the time. And we're not afraid of that person walking down the street who's on the other side of the street. But if they come on your side of the street, then you might get a little bit concerned. Mm-hmm. But if they're just walking like normal, you're still not concerned. But if they're walking like they have crazy, then you kind of start being concerned right away. They actually call that the general adaptation syndrome. If there's a reason to be alarmed, be alarmed. But if there's no reason to be alarmed, don't be alarmed. So my point is, police officers got to understand that just because you wear a gun and a badge, and yeah, you were concerned about your safety, but everybody that you come across is not your enemy. And you can't treat them like that. You treat the real enemy like they are the real enemy, mm-hmm. Because you'll know the difference. So I tell our youth and I tell our officers all the time, police professionally, whether you're in Kendall, Coral Gables, whether you're in Overtown, police based on what the community is treating you like, or what's going on in that community, what are the crime issues. Because people in Overtown deserve as much respect as anybody in Coral Gables too.
What do you want our young men to know about the police who protect and serve their community?
That they're here to be your partners. They're here to see you succeed. They want you to go off and be as productive a citizen as anybody else. They want you to be safe. They want you to be able to play in your front yard, or go to the basketball court, or go to a party and have a good time. They want the same things you want. And will encourage you to go out there and have a good time, as long as you're doing it lawfully. But if every party's got to turn into a shooting, mm-hmm. or every dispute's got to turn into a fight, or every interaction got to turn into a physical altercation, something's wrong with all of us. So I tell the citizens or the youngsters, respect the officer. And I tell the officers to respect the youngsters. Because just because you're exuberant, and because you got a lot of energy, and because you got youth on your side, doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're just young and may not know. And the other side of it is, just because a young person is acting a certain way, like they can't be still, we were all at that point somewhere in our lives. So let the youngsters express themselves, as long as they're not violating the law or hurting somebody. So dance and have a good time. Go to the party and have a great party. But don't start bringing guns and shooting up in the air just because you happen to have a gun. Leave that stuff home and leave that stuff where it should be. And encourage you to basically have dialogue with your officers, because officers need to learn from you as much as you need to learn from the officer.
Mutual respect. I respect you and your efforts to serve our community, and your role as a 5,000 role model mentor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it. It was wonderful to be here.